We're about to start cleaning the featherweight, and I just wanted to pop in and talk to you a little bit about what this video is going to cover and who I had in mind when I made it. I made this video for someone who has a featherweight at home and they've decided they want to take it through the restoration process. I'm not going to show you how to use tools that you probably don't have. I'm going to show you how to use things like old cut up t-shirts, Q-tips, maybe a toothbrush, that sort of thing. I want to stress again, and you'll hear me say this in the video, no water, no alcohol or chemicals on the paint on the body of your machine. Don't do that. I'll show you how to clean the gears. I'll show you how to clean parts, how to get the oxidized lead off of the light sheath. And then I'll show you on a couple little parts on this machine how you can polish up the body and make it shine. I'll cover the products that you might want to have around and show you little bits of the process, and then it will be up to you to go do it. Now, let's get to the fun part, the dirty part. Let's start cleaning our machines. To start, I would like to go over the tools and cleaners that you will need. You cannot have enough Q-tips, and I recommend regular Q-tips. These little pointy ones are pretty great too. And finally, these longer Q-tips, if you have access to them, help you get down inside where you may have had some of that oxidized lead crumble off when you remove the light, and you can get all the little flakes out and reach any grease or anything that's down inside the machine. So you won't need as many of these, but you will use them if you have them. Lots of rags. These are old cut up t-shirts. I wash them and reuse them. I don't ever put fabric softener on them. I just wash them. I go through probably 50 of these on one machine. They're great for polishing and putting the wax on as well. There's no lint that comes off of these. I love these for finishing my machines. Paper towels or shop towels. These are not going to be as linty either, and even if you're just using them to put down on your work surface when you go to clean the lead sheath on the light, having this to catch all of that gunk is great. Different kinds of paint brushes. This is just a cheap, about 1-inch chip brush that I've trimmed. I've given it a haircut, and I use it to get into the gears, and I'm going to show you that just a little bit today. And then just any stiffer, smaller bristled brushes. This one I love. It has this little tip on the end, and actually I can kind of get in the gear and clean between the teeth. Very, very handy. For black machines, oil, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Everyone should know by now, you do not get alcohol on the painted finish. The finish is a shellac and it's very delicate. I would not even put dish soap on this finish. So we'll talk about how we clean the finish in a moment. But you want to have this on hand for parts that are off of the machine. The 91%, it's going to have less water. That's the one you want. Brasso. So where can you use this? Well, I've used it on the badges of the machines and also on the plugs. The prongs on the plug are brass, and this will clean them up if you're careful to remove it all. It will make them look like new. You just have to be careful with where you get it. So if you want Brasso, when you're done cleaning some of your parts, like let's say your presser bar, or maybe the screws that held the feet on, a lot of times you might run into a little bit of rust. This is a great rust remover. I use a Q-tip to apply it, or a rag, and then I immediately wipe the part off and get the must for rust off. But it will handle rust, especially on the screws that are on the feet. Now, I have two products that I really like and I stand by when I clean these black machines. And I don't get paid to talk about this product. It's just something, after a lot of research, I keep coming back to this one. So this particular one is just a pre-wax cleaner, and it's not cheap, but to really bring out a shine, it's my favorite. And if I have places where, if you look here, around where the bobbin winder tension bracket goes, do you see all that crud and grime? Sometimes at the top of the machine, all of this oil that's kind of dried and nasty, the Zymol will polish that off and it will not hurt the shellac. So I really recommend this if you're going to be cleaning more than one machine. If you're not, I have another option for you and I'll show it to you. This is another Zymol product, and the difference is that this is a cleaner wax. Why I love it, two reasons. I can clean and wax in one step. It works just as well as this in most cases, and I don't have to follow up with the carnauba wax. It's built into the cleaner. It's also considerably less money. I believe when I purchased this on Amazon, it was between $20 and $25, and it is a big bottle, 20 ounces. Smells amazing, by the way. This one's sort of like coconutty. This one smells like chocolate. Out of all the cleaners that I've tried, they have the best smell. These I recommend. Yes, you can use just sewing machine oil. There's nothing wrong with that. I choose to use these. For your stainless steel parts, for your screws, it is safe to clean them in a solution of Crud Cutter. This is concentrated, so I dilute it with water. You want to go about 25% Crud Cutter, 75% water. If you get a little bit of more Crud Cutter, it's really not going to hurt anything. What I have found is that you need to dry your parts. So rinse them and dry them right away. Make sure they're really dry, because once you get water on any of the parts, they can rust. It's just reality. So I still use it because it works wonders on dried varnished oil, but this doesn't go inside your machine anywhere or on the body of your machine anywhere. It is only for parts. Now let's talk about process. These are all of the parts for the needle bar. We have the needle bar clamp, the needle clamp. If you clean these in Crud Cutter, which works amazing, these you have to dry really quick, including little places like where the threaded area is on the needle clamp. If you don't dry that, it's going to rust in there. And once it rusts, you're going to have to clean it with rust remover. And if you don't see the rust, you're going to notice that as you're tightening down your needle, you're going to have a hard time turning the little thumb screw. Rust is not your friend. So you kind of have to decide what you want to do and how you need to do it. You can take something like this needle bar, and if you have a polisher that you want to use, that's wonderful. But not everyone has that. Yes, you can soak it in Crud Cutter, use a toothbrush to clean these little parts out, chase after it with some rust remover, make sure you check down in the hole of the needle bar, and polish it up. You really just want to focus on areas like here where the jib's going to set and make sure it's all cleaned out. If you're going to put parts like this, the hook assembly, into a mixture of Crud Cutter and water, you're going to want to dry it really well. These little points here that pivot, yes, you can get rust there. You could even get rust in here. So you have to think about what you're cleaning, how quickly you're going to dry it, and if you need to treat it for rust. Parts like your hand wheel. This is only going to get maybe some Singer oil on a Q-tip to clean off any dust and lint first. Then you're going to want to wipe off as much oil as possible, and you're going to want to come over it with a cleaner wax or a cleaner and then a wax. Inside this hand wheel, you can use oil and a small piece of one of the green Brillo pads. I'll show you what they look like. These here, you can cut a small piece that you can fit inside, put some oil on it, and go to town just buffing it, and then come back maybe with a rag or shop rag. So one of these dipped in sewing machine oil, and you can wipe out all the stuff that you scrubbed off. If you try to clean inside here with alcohol, you're going to risk getting it on the finish. So I don't recommend that unless you have very steady hands. Let's talk about the tension assembly. All of your parts from your tension assembly, the disc, the stud, all of that can be cleaned in Krug Kutter as long as you dry it, except for the painted dials. Do not clean these with anything except for maybe a little bit of water and a cloth, and then polish them. This paint will come off and it will discolor if you get cleaners or alcohol on it. And if you want to see your numbers, you definitely don't want that to happen. It's worth mentioning the bobbin winder. This you have to clean carefully because we have painted parts. So wiping this down with oil, polishing it up. If you need to flush out the port where you drop oil into the bobbin winder, you flush it out with oil, just keep spinning it until it runs fairly clean. Don't put this in any kind of cleaning solution. Here's another part that you don't want to put in a cleaner. You can polish it. You can use a little alcohol in the back if you're careful. Only polish it though. These will discolor. Here's another part of our feed regulator. You can clean this in Krug Kutter, but you need to dry it really quick, and you're probably going to have to treat it with rust remover first and then put a nice coat of oil on it. When you're cleaning the hook assembly, you're going to want to check out the hook. You want to run your finger over the hook point. You're feeling for any rough spots on the hook. You're inspecting it before you put it back on your machine, because if it has any damage, now's when you want to know. If this feels rough or jagged, you're going to want some very, very fine sandpaper, and you're going to want to lightly sand it. I normally just go one direction and get it as smooth as possible. There's another part on the hook assembly that you should check out. This is the thread guard, and it actually goes on the back of the hook assembly like this with the part numbers pointing out. But if you flip it over, you will see right here, do you see this groove? That groove is like, it's bumped out towards you a little bit. It's supposed to be bumped out. What's not supposed to be there are all these little grooves that are worn into the thread guard. This will cause you problems later because your thread will catch on this and you will have issues with pulling your fabric away when you're sewing. Things will get jumbled up down in the bottom. So this is another place where you would use really fine sandpaper to smooth out those grooves the best that you can. Get all the rough spots rubbed off. Let me show you another tool besides sandpaper that can sometimes work to fix this problem. This is a rubber honing stick. You can actually take it, and it's just a little bit easier to control because it's a stick, and you can rub it over those rough spots. And it's a slow process, but it will help you fix that if you don't have any other tools laying around that would work, like a Dremel or something like that. So this is one way that you can fix those grooves and smooth them out. So already that feels so much better. It doesn't feel like the thread's going to catch. I probably would go all the way around till I've removed all the rough spots. There's a big one there. This works well on heads of screws too. So if you're trying to remove the rust on the screws that hold the feet on the machine, the bed cushions, you can run this over the top. It'll clean off any rust that even the rust remover won't remove, but it's not going to wear away the entire head of the screw either. Let me show you another place where you can use this in a pinch. This is the armature with the commutator from the motor. So one great way to clean this is to start with a little bit of rubbing alcohol. And I always kind of dip it. I don't want a lot that's going to run down everywhere. And I might start just by going around and see the carbon that's coming off. I'm not soaking this in alcohol. I'm using a damp Q-tip. You don't want to put oil here. And I'm just going around and cleaning off some of that carbon dust. If you take your honing stick and you rub, not up and down, across, straight, back and forth, this will polish off without going too deep on the copper the rest of the carbon. So this is a very fine layer of copper. So if you go too far, you could polish it off. This keeps it smooth feeling. It's not rough when I'm done, and the motor's going to run fantastic. I've dipped this in a little bit of alcohol, wiped off any excess. I go back over it. Get off that. See, now look. It's just copper. I haven't rubbed it all the way down to nothing. That's what it looked like before. There's after. That will make a difference in how your motor runs. So the rest of the motor, at least the armature, you really don't want to get chemicals on it. You don't want to put chemicals on these threads. If you want to use a rag and kind of wipe them off, you can do that. You can clean the shafts though. Carefully with rubbing alcohol. You can go around. And really all that should be on here is just carbon dust. Maybe a little bit of grease from the grease wicks butting up against the ends of the shafts, just until you're satisfied. But what you really want to focus on is cleaning that commutator. For the rest of the motor, you want to get in with a brush or Q-tips. Don't put alcohol on these. I wouldn't do that. And just kind of wipe out some of that extra carbon dust. And it's pretty gross. Clean it out the best that you can. Don't put chemicals on these wrapped wires and the field core. Don't do that. Don't put anything on these. You can clean the ends of the contacts off carefully with a little bit of alcohol if you want. And don't get alcohol on the outside. You just want to polish this with your polish and your wax. Make sure that you get down inside the brush housings. See all of that dust? And just keep going until you get it so it starts showing up fairly clean when you pull the cotton swab out. There's a lot of carbon dust in there. What about the ports for the grease wicks? So one easy way to clean out some of that extra grease is to take a straw. This is from a can of Aerocroil or WD-40, I believe. And I think when you buy grease from the Featherweight Shop, they send you a few little straws that you can use as well. But these are great for putting inside the port. They'll reach all the way through, and you can just scoop out some of that extra grease. And if you took the springs out, you get so much more of the extra grease out. After you chase some of that grease out, you might want to clean out this end too. See that? So just go over it until you feel like you've got most of it. It's a slow process, but it pays off in the end. So those are some tips for cleaning the motor. I know I told you in another video, don't put anything on these, just wipe them off with a cloth. When you are ready to clean this lead sheath, make sure you're working on something that you can throw away. You can clean the contact points with just a little bit of rubbing alcohol. This is when you want to check and make sure you don't have any broken wires or anything that needs to be replaced. Wipe off the covered wires, but don't put any chemicals on them. But you can clean them up and get the old grease off. To remove the oxidized lead, you're going to need several little tools. Something fine where you can get all the way up to the light fixture, the socket. And you're just going to carefully remove the oxidized lead. As you get further down the light sheath, you can use something like a plastic razor blade. Remove as much as you can and then go back over with a Brillo pad. Just be careful where the dust is going. Wash your hands when you're done. You can finish up by wiping over it with rubbing alcohol. And then the last thing you'll want to do is put a light coat of oil over the clean lead, or if you're interested, you can put heat shrink tubing around it. That works really well. I've heard of people painting these with nail polish and things like that. I do not recommend that. This process of the lead oxidizing happens over a long period of time. So if you can clean everything off and then oil it, you should be good to go. Down inside here, inside the socket, you can swab it out. Not with oil, but just a tiny bit of rubbing alcohol. Make sure those contacts are clean. You do not want any alcohol on the lampshade itself. That will ruin the paint. You can polish all this up and it will look great. Your main goal is to get all of these little crumbly bits of oxidized lead off before you start to put this back into your machine, because you don't want this back in your gears after you work so hard to clean it out. The way that you can clean the gears is, first you're going to want to go through with a Q-tip and you're going to want to get any of the extra globs of grease out. And if you get little bits of Q-tip stuck to the gears, don't worry, you can always get that off later. You really want to focus on wiping out all of that oxidized lead and grease globs. And trust me, it's down there. You see all of that? Clean that out. And it will take a lot of time and patience, but the good news is once you do it, you won't have to do it again for a long time. Now we can see the bottom of this gear a lot easier. You're going to want to spin Get all that off. Just keep spinning. Removing as much as I can. I'm really just focusing on all the big clumps of stuff. And change your angles every once in a while, because you'll see points that you couldn't see when you had it turned a different way. These are the top gears. Let's look at the bottom real quick too. This still has a lot further to go, but I think you get the idea. Q-tips, and remember, you can also turn the gears by the parts, the counterbalance in the nose. Sometimes it's easier to grab a hold of that and spin it than it is the hand wheel. But I'm just cleaning all that gunk off. Yuck. I'm going to keep going with that until I feel like I've pretty much got, here's another way you can spin it. Pretty much got all the big globs off. Don't forget the back side of this gear if you can get to it. It's going to have a lot of gunk on it usually. And the top of this gear. See that? Remember this chip brush that I showed you? This is how we're going to get the rest of the nasty stuff on the gears. And it just, you can work it into the gear like so. And when you load it up, wipe it on a towel. Or you could just buy a bunch of these, and when you feel like it's gross, toss it. But once you get those big clumps out, then you're not just spreading big clumps of grease all over your machine. You can really accomplish a lot with one of these brushes. Come into this side. Then, before you work on the bottoms, inspect all the inside and just use your longer Q-tip to knock down any little flakes of crud down to the bottom so they don't fall down on your clean gears later. These bristles will do a really good job at getting in the teeth for you and save you a lot of hard work. And I have to say, it was my friend Bob Fowler who I first saw using a brush like this. I had been using brushes like this, but when I saw how he cut off the end of one of these, it was like a major light bulb went off in my head. Oh, okay, this is so much quicker. And you just keep going until you are satisfied and it is clean enough for you. And this is not clean enough for me yet, but literally you would be watching me for 3 hours, and who wants to do that? So, and you can use your chip brush to really get in anywhere on the machine. Finer brushes work to get up in those little places that are hard to reach. Then, if you want, you never want to put oil on your gears, but you can use oil to clean other parts of the machine. So you're going to go over your entire machine, the mechanical parts, doing that. Same with down here in the feed dogs. Q-tips will be your friend. Make sure you spend some time cleaning off the post where the hook assembly is going to go back on. While this is off, it's the best time. Look at this. Look what I just found. There is a thread wrapped around the hook assembly. Look at that. Where the hook assembly, this is behind it. That's why you want to clean it. Can you imagine the trouble that could give you? So you can use sewing machine oil on your Q-tip in this area to clean it off. If you're careful, lightly rub this with rubbing alcohol. Just don't get it on the finish. And you're just going to go around and clean that all. If you have extra chip brushes, I wouldn't use the one that you just used on your gears, but that's a good way to get some of that initial dust off. Or a Q-tip with sewing machine oil. Once you get most of that stuff off the paint, it's ready to polish. So you're going to go over your whole machine. Get it as clean as you want it. This is another part that you can clean with sewing machine oil and a rag, and then go over it with one of your Brillo pads and back over it with sewing machine oil and a rag. Inside the nose, you can clean these parts, sewing machine oil, Q-tips on really stubborn parts. If you carefully want to use a cotton swab with some alcohol, you can. Just don't let it drip anywhere on your machine other than where the part that you're putting it on. But I find a rag and sewing machine oil, and I get in there with my fingers and I just keep going over it until it comes back looking fairly clean. The hole for your needle bar, sewing machine oil or rubbing alcohol, carefully. You want to clean this out. If you use rubbing alcohol, do not get it here. So it's probably safer to stick with sewing machine oil. See that? That's all in between your needle bar and the bushing inside. Clean it out. You don't want that there. So after you spend a good 3 to 5 hours cleaning your parts and going all over the inside and out of your machine, you're going to want to polish it. So I want to show you how this shines up with the products I talked about. So let me pick a spot. So I'm going to show you the two products that I'm talking about, and I think between here and here, maybe here, we can see how they work. You want to clean off all of the dust and dirt that you can first. Use your Q-tips, make sure you went around and got all that off. Any stubborn spots, sewing machine oil will work to get it off. You don't want a lot of this when you start cleaning. I'll show you the HD cleanse first. I'll put a little bit on my finger and we'll focus right up here. And I followed the instructions on this, which says do not rub it in circles, but go back and forth in 2 directions. And I'm just putting light pressure. It says not to let it dry, and you polish it off. Can you see a difference? Can you see this here? And then can you see that there? That just cleaned it. Now, if I want to do the clean and wax together, you're going to, same process, back and forth, 2 directions. And I am putting pressure here. You can hear my table rocking. My table's a little wobbly. But I'm going back and forth, 2 directions. All right. Do you see how shiny that is? You can see my lights reflecting in there. But that was more like what it looked like before. Now it has a tremendous shine, and it did not hurt the decals. So I really think you are all smart enough to figure this out. Q-tips and your little holes on the machines, all those little hard places to reach, brushes. Don't put chemicals on the paint. Use rust remover, dry your parts really quickly. You will end up with a beautiful machine. If you have questions, leave them in the comments for me. Don't do anything that you're unsure about. Do your research first. When we come back, you are going to see a cleaned up machine that's ready to put parts back on. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again really soon. Bye.